In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. They didn't just defeat them in battle. They erased them. They deported the leadership, the military elite, the craftsmen, the people who held a nation together. They burned Samaria to the ground and repopulated it with foreigners from across their empire. The northern kingdom, 10 of Israel's 12 tribes, ceased to exist as a nation. Gone.
Repent, you sinners, or face
And the reason the
wrath of
Bible
Almighty.
gives for why it
The
happened.
end is nigh.
The reason the
The
prophets
coming
had been
destruction
screaming
is
from
upon
street
us.
corners for 100 years before it happened
Destruction approaches.
was not military
Turn
weakness,
back, I beg you.
not political
Hear
failure.
my warning.
Israel kept worshiping other gods, not secretly, not at the margins. Kings built temples for them. Priests served in them. Parents took their children to them. For 500 years, the God who parted the Red Sea watched Israel walk into the temples of Baal and Asherah and Molech and stay there. For most of American church history, we've treated those gods like cartoon villains, stone statues, primitive superstition, something obviously inferior, something you'd have to be foolish or faithless to choose. But in 1929, a Syrian farmer's plow hit a stone slab in a field near the Mediterranean coast. And what archaeologists found under that field changed everything we thought we knew about those gods, and about why Israel kept going back to them. When Israel entered Canaan, around 1200 BC, they were walking into a landscape that had been religiously organized for over 2,000 years. Every hill had a shrine. Every city had a temple. Every drought had its rituals. Every natural force that could kill you had a god assigned to manage it. This wasn't naive superstition. It was a fully functional religious operating system built by sophisticated people who were trying to survive in an environment that could kill them without warning. The site that cracked this world open was Ras Shamra, Hill of Fennel in Arabic, on the Syrian coast. A farmer's plow in 1929 uncovered the ancient city of Ugarit, a Bronze Age port city at the crossroads of the ancient Near East. Every empire's trade routes passed through it. On the city's acropolis stood 2 temples side by side, one for Baal, one for Dagon. And in 8 archive rooms across the city, thousands of clay tablets, written in a previously unknown language scholars named Ugaritic, a direct cousin of biblical Hebrew. Those tablets contained something scholars had never had before: the complete mythology of the Canaanite gods written by the people who worshipped them. Not the Bible's hostile account, the worship manuals, the myths, straight from the priests themselves.
Handle it with extreme care.
Scholar Barry Hoberman compared the discovery to the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's significant for understanding the biblical world. What those tablets reveal, combined with 60 years of subsequent excavation across Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, is nothing like what most American Christians have ever been shown. Let's go through the gods, one by one. If you're new here, this channel rebuilds the biblical story from the actual evidence. Subscribe. What's coming is worth your time. Before we get to Baal, we have to start with the God who comes before him. Because this one is inside your Bible in ways most Christians never notice. His name is El. In the Ugaritic tablets, El is the father of the gods, the Ancient One, the creator and patriarch of the divine family. His symbol is a bull, power, authority, procreation. His titles include Father of Years, Creator of Creatures, King. Even Baal, the chief active deity, needed El's permission to act. Now open Genesis 14. Abraham meets Melchizedek, priest of El Elyon, God Most High. Abraham accepts a blessing in that name. And in verse 22, Abraham identifies El Elyon directly with Yahweh. That identification is all through Genesis. El Shaddai, God Almighty. El Olam, the eternal God. El Roy, the God who sees. These are Canaanite divine titles applied directly to Yahweh's, and Exodus 6:3 makes the transition explicit. God says to Moses, I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them. The Bible itself acknowledges that the patriarchs knew God as El before they knew him as Yahweh. Mark Smith at Princeton Theological Seminary, in The Origins of Biblical Monotheism, published in 2001, argues that early Israelite religion absorbed and transformed the figure of El, and in doing so, inherited all the questions that came with El's divine household. His children, his wife Asherah, the entire Canaanite pantheon that surrounded him. The word Israel itself is worth sitting with. Yisrael, one who wrestles with El or God fights, depending on translation. El's name is baked into the national identity from the moment of the nation's founding. This is a people defined by their relationship to the father of the Canaanite pantheon. That's the foundation. Now let's talk about the most famous member of El's family, and the one Israel chose most often. Baal is mentioned 417 times in the Old Testament, more than any other false god, and for good reason. He was the one Israel kept choosing. Your Sunday school version of Baal is probably a stone idol on a shelf, dumb and inanimate. His full title in the Ugaritic tablets is Baal Hadad, the rider of clouds, a young warrior god. His weapon is the lightning bolt, his voice is the thunder, and his primary function, the thing that made him the most worshipped deity in the ancient Levant, was rain. To understand why rain mattered so much, you have to understand the Canaanite agricultural calendar. Every family's food supply depended on 2 rainy seasons: early rains in October and November to soften the ground for planting, and late rains in March and April to fill out the grain before harvest. Between late April and October, 6 months, the eastern Mediterranean receives essentially 0 precipitation. None. The sky shuts off. If the early rains were late, your food reserves ran thin. If the late rains failed, your grain withered before maturity. If both failed 2 years in a row, and this happened, people died. Baal controlled both rainy seasons. His priests had drought rituals. His temples had professional intercessors whose job was to manage the relationship between human communities and the god who decided whether they ate next year. This had been operating for over 1,000 years before Israel arrived. The Ugaritic Baal cycle, 6 tablets dated approximately 1400 to 1200 BC, tells the full story. Baal fights and defeats Yam, the chaos sea god. He builds his palace on Mount Zaphon. Then he fights Mot, the god of death, and loses. Baal dies, goes to the underworld. The rains stop. His sister Anat retrieves him. He comes back to life. The rains return. This maps exactly onto the Mediterranean climate cycle. Baal dies every summer when the rains stop. He returns every autumn when the early rains begin. The entire agricultural world of Canaan watched the sky each year and waited for Baal to come back. Now read 1 Kings 17. Elijah walks into Ahab's court. Ahab, who has made Baal worship the official state religion of northern Israel, and announces, "There will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." This is a direct attack on Baal's core claim. Yahweh controls the rain, not Baal. The drought lasts 3.5 years. Then 1 Kings 18, Mount Carmel. Elijah challenges 450 Baal prophets. Call on your God. Let him send fire. The prophets shout and dance and cut themselves with swords. and the Ugaritic tablets confirm this. Ritual self-laceration is specifically attested in Baal worship. What 1 Kings 18:28 describes was actual cultic practice, not dramatic invention. Nothing happens. Elijah mocks them. Maybe he's deep in thought. Maybe he's on a journey. Maybe he's asleep and needs to be awakened. The Baal cycle describes Baal dying and descending to the underworld, absent, sleeping, unable to act. Elijah knows the mythology cold. He's using Baal's own story against his prophets. Your God is in the underworld. That's why he can't answer. Yahweh sends fire, then rain. The drought breaks on Elijah's word, but the chapter doesn't end the story. 3 years later, Ahab's son is still worshipping Baal. Jehu abolishes it and kills the Baal prophets, and within a generation it comes back. Because the next drought, the next failed harvest, Baal's priests were still there with their rituals and their 1,000-year track record. One final detail from Ugarit. Inside the Temple of Baal, archaeologists found 17 stone anchors left as votive offerings. Sailors who survived storms walked in and left their anchors as thanks to the storm god who had spared them. The god Israel was warned against was the god farmers prayed to when the sky wouldn't open. The god sailors thanked when they made it home. The god with professional priests, ancient temples, and a mythology the entire culture ran on. That's what Israel chose. And now you understand why. If this is changing how you read the Old Testament, subscribe. We're just getting started. In 1975, Ze'ev Meshel of Tel Aviv University was excavating a remote traveler's rest stop in the northeastern Sinai desert called Kuntillet Ajrud, the isolated hill of the water sources. On the plaster walls and on large clay storage jars, his team found inscriptions in 8th century Hebrew, written by Israelites. 3 of those inscriptions said, "I bless you by Yahweh of Samaria and by his Asherah." His Asherah. A second inscription from Khirbet el-Qam, a burial cave 8 miles west of Hebron, heart of Judah, late 8th century BC, reads, "I bless you by Yahweh and by his Asherah. Save him and bless him." Biblical archaeologist William Dever at the University of Arizona spent 40 years studying this evidence. His 2005 book, Did God Have a Wife?, concluded that in popular Israelite religion, the religion of ordinary families, not the official Jerusalem temple, many Israelites understood Yahweh to have a female consort, and that consort was Asherah. Who was she? In the Ugaritic tablets, Asherah is called Ashtoreth, the Lady of the Sea, wife of El, mother of the 70 gods, the most senior goddess in the Canaanite pantheon. When Israel identified Yahweh with El, they inherited a tradition where El had a wife. Some Israelites apparently didn't remove her. Now, the physical evidence. Raz Kletter at the University of Helsinki conducted the most comprehensive study ever done of Israelite material religion, cataloging every female clay figurine found at excavated Israelite sites. Over 3,000 figurines. From Israelite sites, not Canaanite or Phoenician. Sites in Judah and Israel, the heartland, found in houses. Ordinary domestic spaces, kitchens, storage rooms, not temples. These are called Judean pillar figurines, clay women from the waist up, pillar-shaped lower body, prominent cupped breasts. Kletter's conclusion, they were a characteristic expression of Judahite piety. Most scholars identify them with Asherah, the fertility goddess, the mother of gods, the one who helped women conceive and carry children safely. For a woman in ancient Judah with no obstetric medicine, where maternal and infant mortality were constant, The Asherah figurine on the shelf wasn't abstract religious sentiment. It was practical, hopeful, something women in this region had done for generations before Israel existed. These figurines appear from the 10th century BC and remain common through the 7th century. They vanish after the Babylonian exile. In that same 500-year period, look at what the Bible records. 2 Kings 21:7. King Manasseh placed a carved Asherah image inside the Jerusalem temple, not a foreign temple, Solomon's temple, where the ark was kept. It stood there for decades until Josiah's reform in 621 BC. 2 Kings 23:6 says he took it out, burned it at the Kidron Valley, and ground it to dust. Manasseh wasn't doing something shockingly abnormal. He was making official what was already widespread. What was shocking wasn't putting her in. It was Josiah taking her out. Jeremiah 44 records one of the most extraordinary exchanges in the entire Old Testament. Jeremiah has been condemning the women of Jerusalem for baking cakes for the Queen of Heaven, a figure identified with Asherah or Ishtar. And the women argue back. When we burned incense to the Queen of Heaven and poured out drink offerings to her, we had plenty of food and were well off and suffered no harm. But since we stopped, we have had nothing but sword and famine. They're not apologizing. They're making a practical case. When we worshipped her, things went well. When we stopped, look what happened. The God of Israel was asking those women to give up the goddess who had protected their grandmothers and great-grandmothers, the one on every shelf in every home they'd ever visited, the one the priests in Jerusalem had allowed to stand in the temple for decades. Yahweh alone, abstract, imageless, demanding total loyalty, was the alternative. That was never an easy choice. Asherah had a close counterpart in the biblical world, one who appears 8 times by name in the Old Testament and whose most famous worshiper was Israel's wisest king. Her name is Ashtoreth, Astarte in Greek, Ishtar in Babylon. She was a goddess of warfare, love, and sexuality, a combination that sounds strange to modern ears but was coherent in the ancient Near East, where sex and war were both matters of survival, primal forces that needed divine management. 1 Kings 11:5. Solomon worships Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians. And then, on the hill directly east of Jerusalem, across the Kidron Valley, visible from the Temple Mount, Solomon builds her a high place, a shrine, official, permanent. That hill became known as the Mount of Corruption. And those shrines, for Ashtoreth, for Chemosh of Moab, for Molech of the Ammonites, stood there for 300 years. Through the reigns of king after king, until Josiah destroyed them in 2 Kings 23. 300 years. The wisest man in Israel built a shrine to Ashtoreth on the hill across from the temple, and for 3 centuries his successors left it standing. At Tel Mikna Ekron, the Philistine city of Ekron in the southwestern Shephelah, archaeologists found a royal dedicatory inscription in the 1990s, dated to the early 7th century BC. It names the city's patron deity as a goddess figure scholars identify as related to Ashtoreth or her Aegean equivalent. Brought west by the Philistines and absorbed into the Canaanite religious environment, Ashtoreth wasn't marginal. She was worshipped by Israel's most powerful king in a shrine that stood in Jerusalem's official religious landscape for 300 years. If you've made it this far, this is the kind of content this channel exists for. Subscribe. The next section is the hardest to look at. Before we go further, I have to ask the question most Bible studies never ask. Why? Why did Israel keep going back for 500 years? Through droughts and military defeats, the prophets said were direct consequences. Through reformers like Hezekiah and Josiah, who tore down the high places, it kept coming back. Why? The Sunday school answer is a faithless, spiritually rebellious. They knew what was right and chose what was wrong. The Bible says that too. But the archaeology adds what the Sunday school answer leaves out. These people were not choosing obvious falsehood over obvious truth. They were choosing the religious system that had managed life in this region for over 1,000 years before Israel arrived. With sophisticated theology, professional priesthoods, centuries of ritual refinement, and a theology that explained and managed the forces that could kill you. When the rains were late, Baal's priests had a ritual. When a woman couldn't conceive, the Asherah figurine had been on the shelf for 3 generations. When the harvest failed, Ashtoreth's warrior theology offered a framework for why and what to do. Yahweh was offering something different and harder. A covenant, an exclusive relationship with a God who refused to be reduced to a natural force, who demanded trust and moral conduct instead of ritual technique, who gave no guarantees and provided no backup when the rains didn't come. The prophets weren't fighting dumb idolatry. They were fighting a fully functional competing religion with deep roots in the only land these people had ever known. That doesn't make it right, but it makes Israel's failure comprehensible, and understanding it changes how you read every prophet, from Elijah to Jeremiah. Now we come to the God that stops most Bible readers completely. Molech, Leviticus 18:21, 2 Kings 16:3, Jeremiah 7:31, 2 Chronicles 28:3. The Bible is explicit across centuries of text. Israelites burned their children as fire offerings in the valley of Ben Hinnom, Gehenna, just outside Jerusalem's walls. King Ahaz did it with his own son. King Manasseh did it with his own son. For most of modern history, historians debated whether this was real or polemical exaggeration, propaganda against the enemy. Then in 1921, archaeologists excavating ancient Carthage, a Phoenician colony in modern Tunisia, found something called the Tophet of Salambo, a large open-air enclosure filled with thousands of burial urns. Each urn contained the cremated remains of a child, mostly infants, and young animals, sheep, goats, as apparent substitutes in some urns. Harvard archaeologist Lawrence Steger excavated the Tophet in the 1970s and 80s under the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute. His 1984 analysis in Biblical Archaeology Review was unambiguous. These were not natural deaths. The bone analysis showed healthy children whose remains were cremated. The animal substitutes confirmed these were sacrificial deposits. Patricia Smith at Hebrew University analyzed the remains from 342 urns. The infants were mostly 1 to 3 months old, an age range that doesn't match natural mortality patterns. Something was selecting for it. The stone stelae above the urns are inscribed with dedications to Baal Hammon and his consort Tanit, and the inscriptions use the Semitic word MLK, the same 3 consonants as biblical Molech. Scholars now believe Molech was not a deity's name. It was a sacrifice type, a MLK offering, same root as the Hebrew Melech, meaning king, a royal sacrifice, a living child offered to Baal by fire. Why would parents do this? Ancient sources give the same answer. Extreme crisis, military siege, severe famine, a dynasty about to fall. The internal logic was brutal and consistent. If you truly believed your God could save your city and your city was about to fall, what would you give? Plutarch describes Carthaginian practice. The parents stood by without tears, because within this religion, weeping was inappropriate. You were giving your most precious possession to your God. That was faith, not cruelty. Carthage was a Phoenician colony, and Phoenicia was Canaan. The same gods, the same rites carried west across the Mediterranean. No Tophet has been excavated in Jerusalem's Ben Hinnom Valley yet. The valley has never been fully excavated. But the Carthaginian evidence, the multiple biblical references, the classical sources, and the prophets' specific descriptions all converge. When Jeremiah stood at the entrance to Ben Hinnom and said, "They have built the high places to burn their sons and daughters in the fire," something I did not command, nor did it enter my mind. He was describing a real installation, and Josiah's reform in 621 BC specifically included defiling the Tophet, filling it with bones to make it ritually unusable forever. 2 Kings 23:10. You don't decommission a metaphor. Samson, blind, chained between two central pillars of the Philistine temple of Dagon in Gaza, 3,000 people on the roof. He prays and pushes. The building collapses. It reads like a myth, the kind of story told about legendary heroes. In 1971, Amihai Mazar of Hebrew University excavated Tel Kasil near modern Tel Aviv and found a Philistine temple. Digging below it, a second, then a third, 3 superimposed temples spanning the 12th through 10th centuries BC. At the center of each temple's architecture, 2 central wooden pillars on stone bases, primary load-bearing structural elements. Judges 16:26. Samson asks to be placed between the 2 pillars on which the house rests. The Tel Kasil temples were specifically designed so the roof load was carried by 2 central columns. If those columns failed simultaneously, the structure came down. The architecture of the Samson story is archaeologically real. Dagon himself is ancient, attested in cuneiform texts going back to 2500 BC. His name likely means grain, connecting him to agriculture. At Ugarit, Dagon is Baal's father. 2 temples side by side on the same acropolis reflect this father-son divine relationship. By the time the Philistines settled in Canaan, around 1200 BC, coming originally from the Aegean world, they absorbed Dagon as their patron deity. The Bible says they had temples to him at Gaza, Ashdod, and Beth Shan. University of Pennsylvania archaeologists at Beth Shan in the 1920s found 2 Egyptian-era temples, identified as the site where Saul's head was displayed after his death. Then, 1 Samuel 5. The Ark of the Covenant is brought to Dagon's temple at Ashdod. Next morning, Dagon's statue, face down before the Ark. They stand it up. Next morning, face down again, head and both hands broken off at the threshold. The detail everyone skips. 1 Samuel 5:5 notes that from that day, neither the priests of Dagon nor anyone who enters Dagon's temple steps on the threshold. A specific, continuing cultic practice still observed when the text was written. That's not legendary embellishment. That's the texture of historical tradition. Dagon had been worshipped continuously for 2,000 years when the Philistines built their temples. He was Israel's most powerful regional enemy's god for 3 centuries. Not a footnote, a constant. We're in the final section. What comes next reframes everything we've covered. Subscribe and stay with me. In 1868, a German missionary named Frederick Klein was traveling in what is now Jordan, ancient Moab. A Bedouin man showed him a large black basalt stone half buried near the ruins of an ancient city. 3.5 feet tall, uncovered in ancient Semitic inscription. Klein recognized its significance and began negotiations to acquire it. Word spread. Local Bedouins smashed it with fire and cold water before any deal was made, breaking it into pieces to sell separately. A French scholar had taken a paper impression of the stone earlier. Scholars reassembled about 2/3 of the original text. What it said was unlike anything biblical archaeology had ever encountered. The inscription was written by Mesha, king of Moab, around 840 BC. Mesha says Chemosh, the national god of Moab, was angry with his land and allowed Israel to oppress them. Then Chemosh told Mesha to fight back. Chemosh gave him victory. Here is a direct quote from the Mesha Stele. Chemosh said to me, "Go, take Nebo against Israel. I went at night and fought against it from the break of dawn until noon. I took it, and I killed the whole population, for I had devoted it to Ashtar Chemosh." Devoted it. That is the Hebrew word harem, the same word used in the Bible for Israel's total destruction of Canaanite populations under divine command. Mesha used the same language, the same theology, the same concept, applied to Israelite populations on behalf of a different god. The Mesha Stele is now in the Louvre in Paris. It also contains the earliest extra-biblical reference to the House of David, the Davidic dynasty, confirming the historical conflict between Israel and Moab described in 2 Kings 3. But the theological weight isn't in the historical confirmation. It's in the mirror. When you read Mesha's account, you are reading something that mirrors the Old Testament exactly. From the other side. Chemosh angry with his people. Chemosh commanding holy war. Chemosh granting victory. The enemy populations devoted to Chemosh in total destruction. The same language, the same structure, the same divine warfare theology. Applied by Moab against Israel with complete sincerity. Every nation in the ancient Near East had a patron deity who spoke, commanded, fought for them, and demanded total devotion. The prophets were insisting Yahweh alone was actually real, that Chemosh and Baal and Dagon were not. The Moabite stone doesn't settle that claim, but it shows us what Israel was choosing between, not dumb statues and the living God, but competing national religions that used almost identical theological frameworks and made almost identical claims. No wonder the prophets were desperate. Let's put everything on the table at once. El, his divine titles are in Genesis. His name is in the word Israel. The patriarchs called God El before they called him Yahweh.
Look upon your servant.
Israel absorbed him and inherited all the questions that came with his divine household. Beat Baal, not a dumb idol. A sophisticated storm god with professional priests, ancient temples, a mythology the entire culture ran on, and functional control over whether people ate or starved. Elijah understood his theology well enough to attack it using Baal's own story. The sailors left their anchors in his temple. Asherah, not a foreign intrusion, in Israelite homes for 500 years. 3,000 figurines in Judahite domestic spaces. Her name on inscriptions next to Yahweh's. A carved image in the Jerusalem temple for decades. Women in Jerusalem still baking cakes for her while Jeremiah preached outside. Ashtoreth, worshipped by Solomon himself. Her shrine on the hill across from the temple, standing for 300 years in Jerusalem's official religious landscape. Molech, real. The Carthaginian Tophet confirmed what the prophets described. Thousands of cremated infants. Josiah didn't decommission a metaphor. Dagon, the two-pillar architecture of Tel Kassil, confirms the Samson story's structural logic. 2,000 years of continuous worship. Israel's most powerful regional enemy built him temples in every city they controlled. Pause. Chemosh wrote his own holy war theology on the Moabite stone, using Yahweh's own language applied to Israel. And all of them, not just at the borders, not just in foreign cities, in Israelite homes, Israelite high places, and the Jerusalem temple itself. This is why the prophets couldn't stop. They weren't warning about a future danger. They were trying to stop something already happening, had been happening, for generations, in the houses of their neighbors and the hearts of their kings. Here's what the archaeological evidence changes about how you read the entire Old Testament. The contest between Yahweh and the other gods was not a contest between obvious truth and obvious falsehood. It was a contest between a demanding, imageless, covenant-based religion with no ritual techniques for controlling rain or fertility, and a fully operational religious system with thousands of years of cultural roots, professional priesthoods, and theology that managed every force that could kill you. Baal made it rain, or so everyone believed. Asherah helped women conceive, or so everyone believed.
Asherah.
The MLK sacrifice secured divine intervention in existential crises, or so everyone believed. Chemosh fought for Moab as Yahweh fought for Israel, or so Mesha believed. Yahweh offered something different, a covenant, a relationship built on exclusive loyalty and moral conduct. A God who refused to be reduced to a natural force, who couldn't be manipulated by ritual technique, who demanded something harder than the right ceremony at the right time. Sustained trust. Even when the rains were late, even when the harvest failed, even when Chemosh seemed to be winning. That is harder. It was always harder. The prophets knew what they were asking. Hosea compared it to marriage, Yahweh as a husband, Israel as a wife who kept returning to familiar lovers. Not because the lovers were better, but because their rituals had worked before. Because the thing they offered was immediate, tangible, and had served their grandmothers for generations. The archaeology makes Israel's failure comprehensible in a way that should give every modern reader pause before judging. You and I don't live in a subsistence agricultural economy where a bad rainy season means our children go hungry. We have weather forecasting, crop insurance, grocery stores, hospitals. Israel couldn't. And every time the rains were late, the God who had a ritual for that was right there, had always been right there. The prophets weren't asking Israel to choose the obvious right answer. They were asking Israel to choose the harder answer, the one with no technique, no guarantee, no immediate relief. Just a covenant with a God who refused to be a tool. 500 years Israel struggled with that choice. The archaeology shows us exactly what they were struggling against. It doesn't look like weakness anymore. It looks like the most difficult theological demand ever placed on a people. If this changed how you read those 4 words, they worshipped other gods. Subscribe, because every week we do exactly this. We take the stories you've known your whole life and rebuild them from the ground up. Archaeological evidence, original languages, history that your Sunday school skipped and your seminary might have avoided. And next week, we're going to look at one of the most explosive debates in modern biblical scholarship. A debate that has divided seminaries, fired professors, and made the front page of Time magazine. Whether the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are actually the same God, and what the early church fathers and the archaeology say about where that question came from. Hit the bell, subscribe. I'll see you there. The prophets knew what the other gods offered. They knew exactly what they were asking Israel to give up, and they asked anyway, because they believed one God was worth more than every answer the others had.